Everyone's making gear reviews nowadays and talking about what products can and can't do and the specs, but they never show what's possible with that product or the creativity you can have with it. Well, Zhiyun just sent me the new pocket light, and instead of doing a boring review video, I decided the concept for this video should be a challenge, capture whatever happens, and tell the story. The challenge being, make as many cinematic setups as I could, only using this one little light in the next 24 hours. Here's what happened. I started the day like any other. Woke up at 4 a.m., ran 10 miles, took a freezing cold shower, 30-minute Bible study, and ate a high-protein breakfast. Well, at least that's how I wish it went. I actually woke up late for the challenge and lost a bunch of valuable time, but that never stops me from having my morning coffee and breakfast. The day definitely wasn't on my side because I burnt my toast and spilled on my favorite shirt. But I didn't let that stop me either, and I moved on and went to my office to get started on brainstorming shots for the challenge. After about 2 hours of searching Pinterest, Instagram, and Shot Deck, I had a decent arsenal of inspiration for the day. I basically had it broken up between different talent and locations that were available that day. This was the breakdown. So talent 1 was Compton, a ridiculously talented musician, lyrical genius, but a man of few words. He also happens to have a very vibey house that's a playground for people like me. Talent 2 was the smoking hot brunette that also happens to be my wife, and we shot in a garage that was about 120 degrees. But it had a vintage BMW in it, so it was totally worth it. So now it was time to get started. It was already 12 p.m., so this only left 12 hours to shoot as many scenes as possible. I decided to shoot with the red Komodo and Blazar Remus anamorphic lenses for this challenge. I had to give myself an edge here considering this light has no business being a main source. This light is really meant to be a supplementary light to bigger main sources in your kit. It's a 20-watt light doing 2500 to 10,000 Kelvin, so it's pretty bright and versatile. It's got a CRI rating of 94, so it looks pretty darn good on camera. And it comes with barn doors, diffusion, a grid, and an app. So let's see how this thing does in the real world. We got right to work at Compton's house shooting against his wood panel wall, recreating this shot from True Detective. He had some window light coming in that actually provided a good fill to the room, and since I'm only allowed to use this one light, I used that to my advantage the whole entire time. In addition to that, I used any practicals laying around to motivate the M20C and to fill in any dark boring spots. So I grabbed a lamp and threw it on a chair in the background. I put the M20C off to the left and used the diffusion, grid, and barn doors on it. I had it set to 6500 Kelvin and 100%. I also added a 4x4 white bounce to help lift the contrast ratio a bit. And this is what we got. And just as we were finding our stride, we ran into some issues with the M20C. It started overheating within 20 to 30 minutes and it was only 74 degrees in the room. I stuck it in the fridge and it never happened again, so I'm not sure what that was about. The second issue was it died within an hour or so of using it, so I had to run power to it the rest of the day. Other than that, it was working great. So moving on, the next shot was the same background, but a surreal kind of scene with a vintage suitcase that glows gold when it's opened. I again relied on the window light for the ambient levels and then stuck the M20C in the suitcase for Compton to open. We then moved on to a retro phone scene where I had him up against the wood panels and I built out a little coffee table to look vibey. I used this mushroom lamp as a practical and then put the M20C overhead with the diffusion only so the light would spill out around the scene more. You really can't go wrong with a good overhead light, it almost always looks cinematic. And that mushroom lamp kind of helped fill him in on the side there and give him some side lighting so that way it wasn't all top down. And then to finish it off, I put the white bounce on the ground and slightly upright to bounce some light back into his eyes. The next shot was very similar, but we moved to a top-down angle and I put the M20C off to the side and shot it through a hanging plant to give some texture on the floor around Compton. I also warmed it up a bit to mimic sunlight shooting through a tree or something. He needed a little bit more light wrapped around his face, so I took the practical lamp and scooted it to the edge of the table to help fill that in. Then I put the white bounce on his shadow side again and we got a couple top-down shots and that looked great. Then I shifted the camera onto the carpet and with the same lighting setup got some really cool angles. Next up, I wanted to do some cool vinyl shots that had an editorial kind of feel to it. So I started with more top-down shots and set decked the table with a turntable, old vinyl, and of course the mushroom lamp. I also laid some 45s around his head to fill in that dead space and add some texture. I gave him headphones to put on so he had some kind of action to do instead of just laying there. I had to really play with the lighting here, but I eventually landed on closing the barn doors to create a sort of spotlight effect and then shot that from above. Oh, hell yeah, okay. It ended up looking like it was coming from the lamp, but created a nice little circle of light just around his face. I added the bounce and we got to filming. After that, we took a quick break and got some calories because it was only 3 o'clock and we had a long day ahead of us. After we were fed and happy, we came back and played on some variations of the vinyl setup because I liked it so much. Next up was my favorite setup of the whole day. This time we used the kitchen as a background. I had an idea to set deck the kitchen table with an old TV, some Cheerios, and a Yoo-Hoo. Then I put the M20C just over the TV at a frame to supplement the glow of the TV. I had it set to the TV effect, but in hindsight, I wish I had done a take just on a cool continuous light. The right side of the frame looked a little dark, so I grabbed another practical laying around and added a warm table light to contrast that TV. And then I did cheat a little bit, and I used my Aperture MC lights to add some cabinet lighting in the background for texture. Here was the setup light by light. The last shot of the day was a very simple setup with the fridge. I put the M20C inside of it on a red hue and again cheated a little bit using the Aperture MC lights. And 8 shots later, the first location was wrapped. It was now 5:30, I was tired, sweaty, and hungry, so on the way to the next location, I snagged some Chick-fil-A, pumped myself up again. And let's be honest, I mainly got Chick-fil-A to keep my next model happy. The plan here was to shoot with this vintage BMW, however, it was dead and I couldn't drive it. It was also in a corner of a garage which left no space to shoot. So I had to push it out and reposition it to where I needed. Unfortunately for me, it was 100 degrees outside, but after about a 72-point turn, we eventually got it positioned right and I started lighting. The first shot was the M20C shooting warm light through the back window. I had to use some other lights here to make it work, so I added a tube light off to the side to contrast the backlight. The second shot we did was the M20C through the driver window to mimic a cold street light. I then wrapped that light around Jill's face using a tube and then an MC light to mimic the warm cabin light being on, and that was it. I had Jill eat some ramen as a prop because I thought it was a vibe, and I think she kind of enjoyed it. After that, the clock struck 10 p.m. and I decided I had had enough. Oh my gosh. Challenge is done. We got a lot of shots. I'm going to bed.